I didn't cry when he told me I wasn't worth loving. I laughed loud and hollow, like the sound of glass cracking under pressure, because that hurt less than breaking right in front of him. It was supposed to be the happiest week of my life. Graduation was around the corner, caps and gowns ready, parents flying in, futures stitched neatly into resumes and job offers. But instead, I was standing in the middle of an almost empty dorm room, watching the man I had built my world around zip up his suitcase and walk away without a backward glance. His name was Daniel Harper, my first love, my closest friend, and the person I thought would be my last chapter. He was brilliant, ambitious, and sharp in ways I never was. And for a while, he made me believe I was enough, more than enough. But then came the late-night silences, the canceled plans, the way his eyes began to search for exits even while we were kissing. "I can't do this anymore, Aaron," he said, his voice flat, practiced, like he had rehearsed it in the mirror. "You're too clingy. You make everything heavy. I don't see a future with you. Honestly, you were just comfort. Nothing more. Nothing more." Those two words pinned me to the floor harder than any physical blow. Because to me, he had been everything. I swallowed the pain like it was battery acid and tried to look unfazed. "Well," I said with a laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone else, "thanks for the promotion from nothing to comfort." He winced, but he didn't take it back. He didn't apologize. He just pulled the door open, suitcase rolling behind him, and left me staring at a space that still smelled like his cologne. That was 3 days before graduation. The nights that followed were sleepless blurs of cold pizza, unopened textbooks, and the kind of silence that swallows a person whole. Everyone around me seemed to move and fast forward. Photos and gowns, champagne popping, tears of joy, hugs of goodbye. Meanwhile, I was still stuck in rewind, replaying every word, every kiss, every lie I should have seen unraveling before it was too late. And that's when I met him. He wasn't dressed for a campus celebration. While the rest of us wore formal shirts and pressed slacks, he was perched on the low brick wall near the library steps in ripped jeans, an old leather jacket, and sneakers that had walked more miles than I could imagine. His guitar case lay open beside him, half filled with crumpled bills and spare change, though the way he played made you forget the money altogether. His music wasn't polished, not the kind you hear in concert halls. It was raw, aching, alive, the kind of sound that makes you feel like someone has dug their fingers into your chest and plucked your heartstrings one by one. I should have walked past. I should have gone back to pretending I was fine. But something about him made me stop. Maybe it was the way his eyes were closed, as though the world around him didn't exist. Maybe it was the faint smile tugging at his lips despite the sadness woven through his melody. And maybe, just maybe, it was the simple fact that for the first time in days I felt something other than loss. "Don't stop," I heard myself say when he paused to retune a string. He looked up then, his gaze sharp and startlingly warm, like sunlight slipping through cracks. His hair was a mess of curls, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his grin easy and unpracticed. "Requests?" he asked, tilting his head. His voice was husky, carrying the weight of late nights and long roads. I shook my head. "Just keep playing." So he did, and I stood there on the library steps, listening to a stranger sing about places he'd been, people he'd lost, dreams he hadn't given up on yet. His words weren't perfect, but they didn't have to be. They were honest, and honesty was something I'd been starving for. When he finished, I clapped awkwardly, too loudly. He chuckled at my enthusiasm, and I felt the sting of a blush creep across my cheeks. "You a music major or just lost?" he teased. "Neither. Just broken, I guess." The words slipped out before I could stop them. He studied me quietly, the way people do when they're not just looking at you but into you. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his guitar. "Well, broken things make the best songs. I'm Jesse, by the way, Aaron." That's what I wanted to say, but my name felt suddenly small in my mouth. Instead, I gave him a tight smile. "Aaron." That was the beginning. The beginning of late-night conversations outside coffee shops when everyone else had gone home. The beginning of small, reckless touches. his hand brushing mine when he passed me a lighter, his shoulder pressed against mine when the wind grew cold. The beginning of learning that sometimes strangers could stitch wounds more carefully than lovers ever did. But it was also the beginning of something dangerous. Because the closer I got to Jesse, the more I realized he wasn't just passing through my life like a song on the radio. He was staying. He was anchoring me to a world I wasn't sure I was ready to trust again. And somewhere between the laughter and the silence, between his songs and my broken pieces, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Daniel had been wrong. Maybe I was worth loving after all. Jesse had a way of making silence feel safe. We sat on that library wall for what felt like hours, watching students pour past in waves of laughter, their gowns flapping like wings. I thought I would feel bitter, but I didn't. Not when Jesse strummed a lazy tune, his voice rough but soothing, and not when his gaze lingered on me longer than it should have. "You look like you're carrying the whole damn world," he said eventually, his thumb brushing over the strings. "Feels like it," I admitted. "But nobody wants to hear about that." "Try me." I should have shrugged it off. I barely knew him, but something about the openness in his face, the way he wasn't rushing me, pulled the words right out of me. "My boyfriend left me." My throat tightened at the word boyfriend, like I wasn't sure I had the right to use it anymore. 3 days ago. Said I wasn't worth it. Said I was too much. The corner of Jesse's mouth lifted, not unkindly but with the quiet recognition of someone who had heard that before. Sounds like he was too little. I blinked. The bluntness of it made me laugh, sharp and startled. "You don't even know him." "I don't need to." Jesse leaned back, balancing the guitar across his lap. "Anybody who makes you look this wrecked wasn't holding you right." I stared at him, stunned by the simplicity of it. And for the first time since Daniel had left, my chest loosened just a little. That night bled into the next and then the next. Jesse wasn't a student, at least, not in the way the rest of us were. He wasn't cramming for finals or rehearsing for job interviews. He was passing through, playing wherever people would listen. Sidewalks, coffee shops, a dive bar on the edge of town. He slept on couches, in cheap motels, sometimes in his old rusted van parked behind the art building. But he was more alive than anyone I had ever met. I followed him into places I never would have gone on my own. A basement bar where the lights were so dim it felt like secrets could breathe freely. A bridge overlooking the train tracks, where he swore the wind carried your voice farther if you screamed your name into it. A diner at 3 in the morning, sticky tables and weak coffee, where he told me stories about chasing music through states I'd only ever seen on maps. And in return, I gave him pieces of myself I hadn't even given Daniel. Like how I used to stay up at night worrying that I was ordinary, that no one would ever look at me and see someone unforgettable. How my father hadn't spoken to me since I came out. How sometimes I caught my reflection and barely recognized the boy staring back. Jesse never flinched. He just listened, really listened, like my words were worth carrying. One night, sitting in his van with the rain tapping against the roof, I asked him the question that had been eating me alive. Why are you even here? You could be anywhere else. With anyone else. He tilted his head, studying me with that same quiet intensity that made me want to both hide and stay forever. Because you stopped and listened. Most people just pass by. I wanted to believe it was more than that, but I was too afraid to ask. Graduation came like a storm, loud and dazzling and impossible to ignore. I walked across the stage, my name echoing through the auditorium, my gown heavy with sweat and nerves. My mother cheered so loud it made me wince, but I loved her for it. My father didn't come. I should have been thinking about the future. Jobs, apartments, life after school. Instead, all I could think about was whether Jesse would be outside waiting when the ceremony ended. He was, leaning against a lamppost, guitar case at his feet, grinning like he belonged there even though he didn't. My chest tightened at the sight of him, and for a second, I forgot the ache of everything else. You clean up nice, he said, tugging at the collar of my gown. His fingers brushed against my skin, sending a jolt straight through me. I swallowed. You came. Wouldn't miss it. The air between us hummed with something unspoken, something neither of us dared touch yet. But when my mother asked who he was, and I stammered through an introduction, Jesse just smiled politely and squeezed my shoulder, grounding me. That night, when the parties raged across campus, I found myself back in his van, both of us sitting cross-legged on the floor. He strummed softly, a half-formed song spilling into the space between us. "What's it about?" I asked. He shrugged. "You, I think." My breath caught. "Don't look so shocked." His grin softened. "You've been in my head since the library steps. Figure I might as well put you in a melody too." I wanted to kiss him. God, I wanted to. But fear clamped down, fear of moving too fast, of replacing Daniel too soon, of messing up the fragile thing we had. So instead, I whispered, "I don't want to be just another stop for you." His smile faded. He set the guitar aside and leaned closer, his hand brushing against mine. "Then don't be." And for the first time, I let myself believe I could choose differently. But life, as it always does, refused to be simple. Daniel came back. I saw him a week after graduation, standing on the steps outside the administration building, looking sharper than ever in his pressed shirt and calculated smile. He spotted me instantly and strode over like no time had passed. "Aaron," he said, his voice warm, rehearsed, dangerous. "I've been meaning to talk to you." Every nerve in my body screamed to run. But I stood frozen, caught between old pain and new strength. "I shouldn't have left like that," he continued, lowering his voice. "I panicked. You meant more to me than I wanted to admit. I think I made a mistake." My chest constricted. This was everything I thought I wanted to hear 2 weeks ago. But now, with Jesse's music still ringing in my ears, Daniel's words felt hollow. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut in. "Is this guy bothering you?" I turned. Jesse was there, guitar slung over his shoulder, his eyes hard in a way I'd never seen before. He stepped between us, not aggressively but with a certainty that left no space for Daniel. Daniel's jaw tightened. "And you are the one who's here now," Jesse said simply. The tension crackled like static, and for a heartbeat I thought fists might fly. But Daniel just scoffed, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked away without another word. I let out a shaky breath. Jesse turned to me, his expression softening. "You okay?" I nodded, though my hands trembled. "Yeah, thanks." "You don't owe him anything," Jesse said quietly. "Not your time, not your forgiveness. Nothing." And with those words, something inside me finally broke free. I reached for his hand. Not tentative, not hesitant. Firm, certain. He squeezed back. And in that moment, standing on the steps where my world had once collapsed, I realized I wasn't broken anymore. I was beginning again. Jesse's hand was rougher than I expected. The kind of hand that had strummed strings for years and carried too many suitcases down too many roads. But it felt solid, grounding, like a rope pulling me back from the edge. We stood there, hand in hand, while Daniel's figure disappeared into the crowd of campus buildings. For a second, I was afraid Jesse would let go as quickly as he had taken my hand, that this was only a gesture, not a promise. But he didn't. His grip stayed steady, as though he knew I needed that anchor more than I would ever admit. "You sure about this?" he asked softly, his eyes searching mine. "No," I said honestly. "But I want to be." He smiled at that, small and crooked, and in that smile was something that made the ache in my chest ease. The summer after graduation stretched out before me like a blank canvas, terrifying and wide. My roommates moved out, scattering across cities and states for jobs and grad schools. I packed up my things into cardboard boxes and wondered if home was supposed to be the place I was leaving or the place I hadn't found yet. Jesse was still there. Not permanently, never stayed anywhere permanently, but he hadn't moved on either. He kept saying he'd go soon. And yet every day he was still in town, playing outside cafes, laughing with strangers, pulling me into his orbit without asking permission. Started small. Coffee after his sets. Walks by the river at night, where he would hum songs that weren't finished yet. Long afternoons lying in the grass outside the art building, his guitar between us like some kind of fragile truce. And then it wasn't small anymore. One night, I invited him into the apartment that was now too quiet, too empty. He sat on the floor among my half-packed boxes, strumming softly, while I leaned against the couch, just listening. "You ever think about settling down?" I asked, surprising even myself. He looked up, his brows raised. "With what? A mortgage? A 9 to 5? Man, I'd suffocate." "No, I mean," my throat went dry. "With someone." The silence stretched, heavy but not unkind. He set the guitar aside and crawled across the floor until he was close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes. "With you?" he asked. I froze. My heart stumbled over itself, unprepared for the directness of it. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know if I'm asking that yet. But I think about it." Jesse's gaze softened. He reached up, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear, his touch lingering against my cheek. "Then let yourself think about it. You don't need to have the whole picture figured out tonight." And then, without asking, without waiting, he kissed me. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't cautious. It was warm and sure and filled with a kind of hunger that made my knees weak. I kissed him back like I'd been holding my breath since the day Daniel left, and Jesse was the air I'd been waiting for. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, Jesse pressed his forehead to mine. "You feel like a beginning," he murmured. I wanted to tell him he felt like healing, like freedom, like fire, but the words got tangled in my throat. So instead, I kissed him again, letting him taste the answer. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm I didn't want to end. Mornings with coffee and his music spilling through my kitchen. Afternoons wandering the city, his fingers brushing mine whenever no one was looking. Nights lying tangled together on my couch, his voice humming lullabies against my skin. I learned little things about him that no one else probably bothered to ask. How he always carried spare guitar picks in his jacket pocket because he lost them constantly. How he hated the sound of alarm clocks and preferred to wake up with sunlight. How he'd once slept in a bus station for 3 nights straight, writing a song that never made it onto any stage. And he learned me, my fears, my scars, the way I chewed the inside of my cheek when I was nervous. He even learned the silence I carried, the silence I never showed Daniel because I thought silence meant weakness. Jesse didn't fill it with noise. He just sat in it with me, and somehow that made it less heavy. But love, if that's what this was, never comes without shadows. Daniel wasn't gone. He texted. First, just once. "I miss you." I didn't answer. Then, "Can we talk?" Then, "You owe me at least a conversation." I blocked him, but I couldn't block the guilt, or the memories, or the way part of me still ached when I thought of what we'd been before it all shattered. One night, Jesse caught me staring at my phone too long, my jaw tight, my chest a battlefield. He plucked it gently out of my hands and set it on the counter. "Don't let him live here," he said, tapping a finger against my chest. "He already walked out. Don't let him keep space." I wanted to promise I wouldn't, but promises felt dangerous. So I just leaned into Jesse's hand when he cupped my face, and for the moment, that was enough. Then came the night everything cracked open. Jesse had a gig at a small bar downtown. I went like I always did, sitting in the back with a drink I barely touched, watching him own the stage in a way I envied. His voice filled the room, his eyes catching mine every so often, like every lyric was meant for me. Halfway through his set, I saw Daniel. He was leaning against the bar, glass in hand, his gaze fixed on me. Not Jesse, me. My stomach twisted. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows, but his eyes pinned me there. When Jesse's set ended, I slipped outside for air. Daniel followed. "Aaron," he said, stepping into the glow of the streetlight, "we can't keep avoiding this. There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about." His voice cracked, a rare slip. I screwed up. I was scared. I said things I didn't mean. "But you, God, you're it for me. You always have been." My chest clenched. The boy I had loved, the boy I had dreamed futures with, standing here telling me everything I had once begged to hear. But behind him, Through the bar's window, I could see Jesse laughing with the bartender, his smile real and easy and uncalculated. And I realized Daniel's words, however desperate, were too late. "I'm not yours anymore," I said, my voice shaking. Daniel's face hardened, a mask snapping back into place. "So what? You think that guy's gonna stay? He'll leave you the second something better comes along. That's what people like him do." My hands curled into fists. "You don't get to define him. Or me." Before he could answer, the bar door swung open. Jesse stepped out, guitar case slung over his shoulder, eyes flicking between us. "You good?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. I nodded. And without hesitation, in the middle of that streetlight glow, I reached for Jesse's hand. Daniel saw it. The final blow. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he walked away, disappearing into the dark. I leaned into Jesse, trembling, my heart pounding like I just jumped off a cliff. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered. "Yes, I did," he said simply. And then, softly, "Because I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in months, I believed it. The weeks after Daniel's final disappearance felt like living in the aftermath of a storm. The rain had passed, the thunder had rolled on, but debris still littered the ground, small reminders that something violent had shaken me down to the bone. I kept waiting for Jesse to vanish too. That's what storms did. They came loud, they came fast, and then they were gone. But Jesse stayed. He stayed in the quiet mornings when the light spilled through my blinds. He stayed in the late nights when the world felt too heavy and I couldn't find the words to explain why. He stayed when I snapped at him without reason, when my insecurities clawed back to the surface, whispering that I was too much, not enough, never enough. And every time I braced for him to walk away, he just reached for his guitar, strummed a few chords, and sang until my chest loosened. Still, the fear lingered. "You'll leave one day," I told him once, lying in the grass with his jacket under my head. The stars blinked cold and indifferent above us. "That's what you do. You move on." He turned his head toward me, his curls falling into his eyes. "And what if I don't?" "You will." My throat tightened. "Everyone does." His fingers found mine in the dark, weaving them together. "Then I'll make it the longest damn one day you've ever seen." But life doesn't pause just because you want it to. Summer dwindled, the air growing sharp with the promise of fall. Job offers pressed in, my mother called with questions about apartments and health insurance, and Jesse was offered a string of gigs stretching across 3 states. The choice loomed. Follow him into the unknown or plant my feet in the soil I'd always known. "You don't have to decide right now," Jesse told me, brushing his lips across my temple. "I'm not asking you to give up your life for me." "But that's just it," I said, voice cracking. "I don't know what my life is without you in it anymore." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kissed me slow, deep, like he was trying to write the words neither of us could find directly onto my skin. When he finally pulled back, he whispered, "Then let's figure it out together." The night he was supposed to leave, I helped him load his van. The guitar, the boxes of mismatched clothes, the notebooks filled with half-finished songs. He looked restless, torn between the road calling him and me holding him back. "You could come," he said suddenly, his eyes searching mine. "We'll play it by ear. No map. Just us." Fear surged in my chest. Fear of failing. Fear of being left on some roadside when he realized I wasn't as free as him. But underneath the fear was something else. Want that was bigger than my fear, bigger than my doubts, bigger than the ghost of Daniel whispering that I wasn't worth it. So I took a breath, stepped forward, and kissed him hard enough that my decision spilled out of me without words. "I'll come," I whispered against his lips. His smile broke wide, brighter than I'd ever seen. The months that followed weren't perfect. The van broke down twice. Once in the middle of Kansas where we had to sleep in the back under the stars. Money was tight, arguments happened about where to go next, about my panic when I thought he was slipping away, about his fear of being tied down. But every fight ended the same, with his guitar between us, with my head against his chest, with the stubborn knowledge that love wasn't supposed to be flawless. It was supposed to be real. And real was enough. One night, in a small-town bar where the crowd was half-drunk and more interested in the football game on TV, Jesse looked at me before he started his set. Just looked, steady and sure. "This one's for Aaron," he said into the mic. And then he sang a song I had never heard before. A song about library steps and graduation gowns. About heartbreak and second chances. About hands finding each other in the dark. His voice cracked on the last line, and when the room erupted in applause, none of it mattered because his eyes were on me the whole time. Later, back in the van, I pressed my forehead to his and whispered, "I don't care where we end up, as long as I'm with you." He kissed me, slow and certain. Then we're already home. Years from that night, when the road had carved its marks into us, when we had collected cities like postcards and songs like breaths, I sometimes thought back to the dorm room where Daniel told me I wasn't worth loving. And I realized he had been right in one way. I wasn't worth loving, at least not by him. But I was worth loving by someone who saw me, who stayed, who turned my broken pieces into music and sang me back to life. I was worth loving by Jesse. And that was everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.